Captain Elena Vasquez looked out the window of her ship at the beautiful blue and green planet below. After 6 months of travel through deep space, the sight of New Haven made her smile. This would be their third medical station built in the outer worlds, and she felt proud of the work they were doing. The research vessel Meridian had been her home for 5 years now. It was not the biggest or fastest ship in the human fleet, but it was reliable. More importantly, it carried hope to the far corners of known space. Elena and her crew worked with alien doctors and scientists to bring medical care to planets that had none. "Captain, we are getting a message from the Zelani ship," said Lieutenant Torres from his station. The young man had joined the crew just 2 years ago, but he was smart and eager to learn. Elena nodded. "Put it on the main screen." The image that appeared showed Commander Salith, one of the Zelani officers she had worked with many times before. The Zelani were tall, graceful beings made of what looked like living crystal. Their bodies caught and reflected light in beautiful patterns. They had been humanity's closest friends among the stars for 50 years. "Greetings, Captain Vasquez," Scylla said in his musical voice. "Are you ready to begin the survey of the landing sites?" "Yes, Commander. My medical team is excited to start building the new station. Dr. Williams thinks this planet is perfect for treating the lung problems that affect people in this region." Scylla's crystal features seemed to shift, which Elena had learned was similar to a human smile. "Your species continues to amaze us with your desire to help others. We are honored to work alongside humanity." After the call ended, Elena felt that familiar warmth she always got when working with the Zelani. When humans first met them decades ago, many people had been afraid. The Zelani were so advanced, so different, but they had welcomed humanity into the Galactic Council and taught them about space travel, alien cultures, and peaceful cooperation. Elena remembered her grandfather's stories about the early days of human space travel. Back then, humans had been alone and afraid, not knowing if anyone else was out there. Now they had friends and allies across the galaxy. The Zelani had made that possible. "Captain, we are picking up some strange signals," called out Ensign Park from the communications station. She was frowning at her screen, adjusting controls and listening carefully through her headphones. "What kind of signals?" Elena asked, walking over to look at the readings. "They are encrypted and very faint, coming from the direction of the Zelani ship. But they are not using normal communication channels." Elena felt a small chill but pushed the feeling away. Probably just internal ship communications. Different species use different methods. But as the day went on, Ensign Park kept finding more of these strange signals. They were all coming from Zelani ships and going out toward the edge of the solar system. Elena tried to ignore her growing worry, but something felt wrong. That evening, while most of the crew was sleeping, Elena sat in her quarters going over the mission reports. They had built medical stations on 12 worlds now, always with Zelani help and guidance. The alien doctors were skilled and generous with their knowledge. So why did she feel so uneasy? She called up the star charts on her computer and looked at all the places they had worked. The medical stations formed a pattern across human space, but Elena could not figure out what it meant. They were all in border regions, places where human colonies were still growing and spreading. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." Dr. Williams entered, looking tired but concerned. He was the chief medical officer and had been Elena's friend for many years. "Captain, I need to show you something. I found it while organizing the medical supplies the Zelani gave." "Yes." He handed her a small device she had never seen before. It was smooth and warm to the touch, with tiny lights blinking along its surface. "What is it?" she asked. "I am not sure, but it was hidden inside one of the medicine containers. When I tried to scan it, my instruments went crazy." "This thing is sending out some kind of signal." Elena felt her stomach drop. "How many of these did you find?" "7 so far, all hidden in different supply boxes." Elena stared at the device in her hands. Her mind was racing, but she did not want to believe what she was thinking. The Zelani were their friends. They had been working together for years. There had to be a simple explanation. "Captain," Dr. Williams said quietly, there is something else. I checked the medical records from our previous missions. In every system where we built a station, human colonies have been attacked within 6 months. The device in Elena's hands suddenly felt very heavy. That could be a coincidence. Maybe. But I also noticed that the attacks always hit exactly the places our medical surveys said were most vulnerable. Areas with poor defenses, small populations, limited escape routes. Elena set the device down carefully and looked at her old friend. What are you saying, Doctor? I think we have been helping someone plan attacks on our own people. The words hung in the air between them like a poison. Elena wanted to argue to find another explanation, but the evidence was starting to make a terrible kind of sense. The medical missions, the surveys, the detailed reports they had been sending back to Earth and sharing with their Zilani partners, all of it could be used to plan attacks. We need more proof, Elena said finally. If this is true, if the Zilani have been using us, then we need solid evidence. Dr. Williams nodded. What do you want me to do? Keep this between us for now. Document everything you find, but do not let anyone else know what we suspect. I'm going to see if I can decode those signals Ensign Park has been detecting. Over. The next 3 days, Elena and Dr. Williams worked in secret. The doctor found more hidden devices and began to understand how they worked. They were transmitting detailed information about human activities, including defense positions, population numbers, and resource locations. Elena spent hours trying to break the encryption on the signals. It was difficult work, but her grandfather had taught her about old military codes when she was young. Slowly, pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. The breakthrough came on the 4th day. Elena finally cracked part of the code and saw words that made her blood run cold. The signals were going to Kethver ships, the brutal empire that had been attacking human colonies for months. The Zilani were sending detailed intelligence about human activities to their worst enemies, but it got worse. The decoded messages talked about a final phase and complete elimination. The Zilani were not just helping the Kethver attack human colonies. They were planning to wipe out humanity entirely. Elena's hands shook as she read message after message. 50 years of friendship had been a lie. Every human who had died in the border wars had been betrayed by their closest allies. The Zilani had been hunting them from the very beginning. Using human trust and cooperation to plan their destruction, she tried to send a message to Earth, but found that the Zilani had somehow blocked all their communications without anyone noticing. They were trapped, and their alien friends knew they had discovered the truth. The attack came at dawn. Zilani ships surrounded the Meridian, and Commander Silith appeared on their screen one last time. But now his crystal features showed no warmth or friendship. You were not supposed to find out yet, he said coldly. Your species is too curious for its own good. Elena stood on her bridge, surrounded by her crew, and felt a rage like nothing she had ever known. Why? She asked. We trusted you, we helped you, we thought we were friends? Friends? Silith's laugh was like breaking glass. You were tools. Useful for a time, but dangerous if left to grow. Your kind spreads too fast, learns too quickly. The galaxy is better off without you. As Zilani weapons began to charge, Elena managed to send one final message on an emergency frequency. She did not know if anyone would hear it, but she had to try. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Meridian. The Zilani have betrayed us. They have been working with the Kethver to destroy human colonies. They have been hunting us from the beginning. Trust no one, make them pay. The ship exploded in crystal fire, but Elena's last words raced toward Earth at the speed of light, carrying a warning that would change everything. Admiral Marcus Chen was drinking his morning coffee in his office on Earth when the emergency alarm started screaming. He had been in the military for 30 years, but he had never heard the alarm sound quite like this. It was the code for an attack on multiple human worlds at the same time. He ran to the command center, spilling coffee on his uniform. The main screen showed a map of human space, and red lights were flashing everywhere. New Sydney, Morgan's World, Haven Colony, Riverside Station, and 8 other planets were all under attack. The same message was coming from all of them. Alien ships were bombing cities and killing everyone they could find. "Sir, we just received this transmission," said Captain Ross, his second in command. She looked pale and scared. "It came in right." Before the attack started, Elena Vasquez's voice filled the room, crackling with static and fear. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Meridian. The Zilani have betrayed us. They have been working with the Kethver to destroy human colonies. They have been hunting us from the beginning. Trust no one. Make them pay." Admiral Chun felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. Elena Vasquez was one of their best captains, and the Meridian had been on a peaceful medical mission with Zilani partners. If she was right, then 50 years of friendship and cooperation had been a lie. "Get me a connection to the Galactic Council immediately," he ordered, "and start pulling back all our ships from joint missions with alien crews." But when they tried to contact the Galactic Council, no one answered. The communication channels that had been open for decades were suddenly silent. Even worse, human ships working with alien partners were reporting that their allies had turned on them without warning. The attacks were more terrible than anything humans had ever seen. The enemy knew exactly where to hit to cause the most damage. They destroyed power plants, communication centers, and defense stations first. Then they bombed schools, hospitals, and homes. Millions of people died in the first few hours. Admiral Chun watched the reports coming in and felt sick. The attacks were too well planned, too precise. The enemy knew everything about human defenses, escape routes, and weak points. This could only happen if someone had been giving them detailed information for years. "Sir, Dr. Sarah Kim is here." "To see you," said Captain Ross. "She says it's about the attacks." Dr. Kim was Earth's best expert on alien biology and technology. She was a small, quiet woman who spent most of her time in laboratories, but her work had helped humanity understand their alien neighbors better than anyone else. "Admiral, I have been studying the attack patterns," she said as she entered the room. "The enemy ships are using weapons that should not exist." "What do you mean?" Dr. Kim put a datapad on his desk. "Look at these energy readings from the attacks. The Kefir have always used simple plasma weapons, but these readings show they are using Zilani crystal technology, Thurian force shields, and Vec particle beams all at the same time." Admiral Chun studied the data. "How is that possible?" "It should not be. Each species guards their military technology very carefully. The only way the Kethver could have all these weapons is if other species gave them the technology willingly." The terrible truth was becoming clear. This was not just a betrayal by the Zilani. Multiple alien species were working together to destroy humanity. The Galactic Council itself might be part of the plan. "There is something else," Dr. Kim continued. "I have been looking at Zilani technology that we have in our laboratories. Much of it is not original Zilani design." "What do you mean?" "I found traces of genetic material from at least 6 different species embedded in their crystal technology. Species that are supposed to be extinct." "Admiral, I think the Zilani have done this before. They make friends with a species, learn everything about them, then help destroy them and steal their technology." Admiral Chung felt a cold rage building in his chest. "How many species?" "From what I can tell, at least 12 species have been completely wiped out over the past 500 years. All of them were young, expanding civilizations. All of them had something the Zilani wanted. And now it's our turn." Dr. Kim nodded. "But Admiral, there is something different about humanity. We adapt faster than other species. We learn from our mistakes, and we do not give up." The attacks continued for 3 days. 12 human worlds fell completely, their populations killed or captured. But on the 4th day, something changed. Human survivors began fighting back in ways the enemy did not expect on Morgan's world. A group of farmers used mining equipment to destroy enemy landing ships. On New Sydney, children who had learned military tactics in school organized resistance groups. On Haven Colony, doctors turned their medical knowledge into weapons that targeted alien biology. "Sir, we are getting reports from the outer colonies," said Captain Ross. Human civilians are not just running away. They are studying the enemy and finding ways to fight back. Admiral Chun looked at the reports coming in. A teenage girl on Riverside Station had figured out how to jam Kethver communications using her school's science equipment. A retired engineer on Darwin's Rest had built bombs that could destroy Zilani crystal ships. Everywhere humans were being attacked, they were learning and adapting. The enemy made a mistake, he realized. They thought we would panic and collapse, like other species probably did, but humans do not work that way. Dr. Kim had been working without sleep for days, studying captured enemy technology. She came to see Admiral Chun with news that would change everything. "I found something incredible," she said, her eyes bright with excitement and anger. "The Zilani technology is not superior to ours, it is just older." "Much older," explain. "They have been using the same basic designs for thousands of years. They do not innovate or improve. They just steal what they need from other species. But human technology has been advancing rapidly. In some areas, we are already better than they are." Admiral Chun leaned forward. "What areas?" "Computer systems, communications, and most importantly, weapons design. We have been building our technology from scratch, learning as we go. They have been using stolen designs they do not fully understand. Can we use this?" Dr. Kim smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Admiral, I think we can do more than just use it. I think we can turn their own technology against them." While Dr. Kim worked on understanding alien technology, Admiral Chun faced a harder problem. The human military had been built for exploration and defense, not for the kind of total war they now faced. But humans had something their enemies did not expect, the ability to change quickly, within a week. Every human colony had begun converting their factories to make weapons instead of peaceful goods. Every human with military training, from current soldiers to retired veterans, volunteered to fight. Even civilians who had never held a weapon began learning how to kill. The change was remarkable and terrifying. Humanity had always been peaceful. Explorers who preferred cooperation to conflict. But when threatened with extinction, they became something else entirely. They became predators. "Sir, we have decoded more enemy communications," said Captain Ross. "It looks like they expected us to surrender by now. They are confused by our response." Admiral Chun looked at the decoded messages. The aliens were calling human resistance irrational and self-destructive. They could not understand why humans continued to fight when they were clearly outmatched. "They do not understand us at all," he said. "They think we are just another weak species that will give up when faced with superior force. They do not know what happens when you back humans into a corner." Dr. Kim returned with her final report 3 weeks after the attacks began. Her findings would reshape the war and determine the fate of every species in the galaxy. "Admiral, I have figured out how their technology works. More importantly, I have found their weaknesses. Every single alien species has biological or technological vulnerabilities that we can exploit. Can we build weapons to use against them? Better than that, we can build weapons that are specifically designed to kill each species. Weapons that will only work on them and will not harm humans or any other species we choose to protect." Admiral Chun felt the cold rage that had been building in him for weeks finally find its focus. The aliens had wanted a war. They had planned to wipe out humanity like they had 12 other species. But they had made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated what humans could do when they stopped trying to be civilized. Commander Jake Morrison crouched behind the twisted metal of a destroyed building on Kepler 7. The planet had been under enemy control for 2 months, but his team of 30 humans had been causing more damage than anyone thought possible. Today, they were going to try something that should have been impossible. "Thermal charges are in place," whispered Sergeant Kim through his earpiece. She was only 22 years old, but she had learned to build explosives from captured alien technology better than engineers with decades of experience. "Scanner disruptors ready," reported Corporal Martinez. He had been a computer programmer before the war, But now he could hack alien systems in ways that confused even their creators. Jake looked through his scope at the Zalani command center below. 3 months ago, he had been a mining supervisor on a peaceful colony world. Now he was leading raids that were making the enemy afraid to leave their fortified positions. The aliens expected humans to fight, like other species they had conquered. They expected large armies meeting in open battle, with clear rules and predictable tactics. Instead, humans disappeared into shadows, struck without warning, and used weapons the enemy had never seen before. "Remember, we are not just trying to win this battle," Jake told his team. "We are teaching them that hunting humans is the worst mistake they ever made." The attack began at midnight. Corporal Martinez disabled the alien security systems while Sergeant Kim's explosives destroyed their communication towers. But this was not just about causing damage. Dr. Kim's research had taught them that each alien species had specific weaknesses they could exploit. The Zalani were made of living crystal that could be shattered by certain sound frequencies. Jake's team had built sonic weapons from captured equipment and human audio systems. When they attacked, the beautiful crystal beings began to crack and break apart, screaming in frequencies that human ears could not hear. The HFY were strong and tough, but their armor had gaps that human weapons could exploit. More importantly, they were used to fighting enemies who were afraid of them. Humans were not afraid anymore. They were angry. "Jake, we have a problem," called Martinez from his position. "Enemy reinforcements coming from the north." "Looks like 2 full squadrons," Jake smiled. This was exactly what they had hoped for. Spring the trap. Hidden human teams opened fire from positions the aliens did not know existed. But these were not normal weapons. Dr. Kim had taught them how to modify human technology to target alien biology. The HFY weapons that should have protected them suddenly began to malfunction. Their own technology was being turned against them. Within an hour, the alien forces on Kepler-7 had been completely destroyed. But more importantly, Jake's team had captured intact alien equipment and several prisoners. This information would help human scientists understand their enemies even better. Back on Earth, Dr. Kim was working around the clock in laboratories that had been converted from peaceful research centers into weapons development facilities. She had made discoveries that amazed even her. "Admiral Chun, you need to see this," she said as she entered his office. She looked tired but excited. "I have been studying the prisoners we captured, and I found something incredible." Admiral Chun looked up from the reports he was reading. Every day brought news of more successful human raids and captured alien technology. The war was turning in ways no one had expected. "What did you find?" "The Zalani are not really one species. They are a collective of absorbed life forms. When they conquer a species, they do not just steal their technology. They absorb the best individuals into their crystal matrix. They become part of the Zalani collective. That explains how they got so much stolen technology." "But Admiral, there is more. I found traces of human genetic material in the crystal matrix of the prisoners we captured." Admiral Chin felt his blood turn cold. "What does that mean?" "It means they have been taking humans for much longer than we thought. Probably for decades, using the medical missions and joint operations. They have been studying us from the inside." The implications were staggering. Every human who had worked closely with the Zalani, every joint mission, every cultural exchange might have resulted in people being absorbed into the alien collective. The betrayal was even deeper than they had imagined. "But Doctor, if they have human knowledge, why are we winning?" Dr. Kim smiled. "Because they do not understand what they absorbed. They can copy human knowledge, but they cannot copy the human spirit. They cannot copy our ability to adapt and change. And most importantly, they absorbed humans from before the war began. They do not know what we have become." The war had changed humanity in fundamental ways. The peaceful explorers and diplomats of the past had been replaced by something harder and more dangerous. Humans were learning to fight with a creativity and ruthlessness that their enemies could not match. On the front lines, Commander Morrison and teams like his were proving this every day. They did not just attack enemy positions. They studied how the aliens thought and found ways to turn their own strengths against them. The Thurians rely on their energy shields, Morrison explained to a group of new recruits. So we built weapons that feed energy back into their shields until they overload and explode. The Vec use telepathic communication, so we developed mental static generators that give them headaches so bad they cannot think straight. The recruits listened carefully. These were farmers, teachers, and store clerks who had volunteered to fight. None of them had been soldiers before the war, but they were learning faster than anyone thought possible. The key is not to fight them the way they expect, Morrison continued. Every species they conquered before probably tried to match their technology and tactics. We do the opposite. We use our weaknesses as strengths. This was the human advantage that the aliens had not anticipated. Other species had tried to become more like their conquerors. Humans became more like themselves, only more so. Dr. Kim's laboratories were producing new weapons every week. Some were based on captured alien technology, but the best ones were purely human innovations. Weapons that no alien species would have thought to build because they solved problems in uniquely human ways. We have developed a new class of weapons, she reported to Admiral Chun. Biological agents that target specific alien species while leaving others completely unharmed. But these are not like anything that has been used before. How so? Most biological weapons kill quickly. These are designed to disable enemy forces gradually over several days. The aliens become weaker and more confused, but they stay alive long enough to see what is happening to them. It is psychological warfare as much as biological warfare. Admiral Chun studied the reports. The new weapons were effective, but they were also cruel in ways that made him uncomfortable. Before the war, humans had prided themselves on fighting ethically and treating enemies with respect. Now they were developing weapons designed to cause maximum psychological damage. Doctor, are we becoming the kind of species we used to hate? Dr. Kim was quiet for a moment. Admiral, they plan to wipe us out completely. Not just kill us, but erase every trace that humanity ever existed. They wanted to steal our technology, absorb our best people, and then eliminate the rest like we were pests. I think being cruel to genocidal aliens is acceptable. The truth was that humanity had passed a point of no return. The discovery of what the Zilani had really been doing, the scale of the betrayal, and the realization that multiple alien species had planned their extinction had changed them forever. Reports were coming in from across human space on every world that had been attacked. Survivors were not just rebuilding, they were preparing for revenge. Factories that had made peaceful goods were now producing weapons of war. Schools were teaching children military tactics alongside reading and mathematics. Even art and music had become focused on the war effort. Sir, we have intercepted alien communications, reported Captain Ross. They are calling for a general retreat from human space. It looks like they want to establish a defensive line and try to negotiate. Admiral Chun looked at the tactical displays showing human forces advancing on dozens of worlds. 6 months ago, they had been on the edge of extinction. Now the aliens who had planned to destroy them were running away. What are your orders, sir? Asked Captain Ross. Admiral Chun thought about Elena Vasquez's last message. Make them pay, she had said. He thought about the millions of humans who had died in the initial attacks. He thought about the decades of betrayal and the plan to erase humanity from existence. No negotiations, he said finally. They wanted a war of extinction. They are going to get one. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the battleship Vengeance and watched the Zilani homeworld grow larger on the main screen. 2 years had passed since he was a simple mining supervisor hiding in ruins. Now he commanded the largest human fleet ever assembled, and he was about to end a civilization that had existed for thousands of years. The journey to this moment had been long and terrible. Operation Nemesis had begun 6 months ago with simultaneous attacks on Zilani strongholds in 12 star systems. The aliens had expected humans to fight like other species they had conquered. Instead, they faced an enemy that had learned to fight without rules. Admiral, we are receiving surrender offers from the surface, reported Captain Sarah Kim. She had been Dr. Kim's younger sister, a former teacher who now served as his communications officer. The war had changed everyone. Ignore them, Morrison said without emotion. Begin the bombardment. The human fleet opened fire. But these were not ordinary weapons. Dr. Kim's laboratories had created something specifically for this moment. The electromagnetic pulse weapons sent invisible waves toward the planet below, targeting the frequency that disrupted Zilani crystal neural networks on the surface of the crystal world. The effects were immediate and horrifying. Zilani beings began to lose their higher brain functions, becoming confused and helpless. Their beautiful crystal cities, which had stood for millennia, started to crack and crumble as the beings who maintained them could no longer think clearly. "Sir? We are getting panic transmissions from across the planet," reported Lieutenant Torres. "They are begging us to stop." Morrison watched the tactical display as one by one the Zilani defense systems went silent. Did they stop when they were planning to erase humanity from existence? Did they show mercy to the children on New Sydney? The answer was no, and everyone on the bridge knew it. The humans had found detailed Zilani records showing exactly what they had planned for humanity. Complete extinction, with human genetic material and cultural records destroyed, so completely that no trace would remain that humans had ever existed. But the electromagnetic weapons were only the beginning. Dr. Kim had developed something much worse, something that would ensure the Zilani could never recover or rebuild their civilization. Begin Phase 2. Morrison ordered. The second wave of weapons contained a biological agent designed specifically for Zilani crystal biology. Unlike the electromagnetic weapons that simply disabled their minds, this agent attacked their physical structure. The crystal beings began to dissolve slowly, their bodies breaking down into component minerals over several days. The process was designed to be gradual and visible. Every Zilani on the planet would see what was happening to their people and know that their extinction was inevitable. It was psychological warfare on a scale that had never been used before. "Admiral, we are receiving a priority message from the Galactic Council," said Captain Kim. "They are demanding that we stop the attack and agree to peace negotiations." Morrison laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Put them on screen." The image that appeared showed Council Chairman Veltrix, a tall, thin being from the Alcran species. His 4 eyes showed fear and desperation. "Admiral Morrison, you must stop this attack immediately. The Council offers humanity full membership and any concessions you demand. There is no need for this level of destruction." "Where was the Council when the Zilani were planning our extinction?" Morrison asked. "Where were you when they needed your approval to attack our colonies?" Veltrix's skin changed color, which Morrison had learned meant the alien was very afraid. "The Council was deceived. We did not know the true extent of Zilani plans." "You knew enough," Morrison replied. "We found your communications, Veltrix. The Council voted to approve the final solution to the human problem. You all agreed that humanity needed to be contained before we became a threat." The truth was that intercepted Council records had revealed the full scope of the conspiracy. It was not just the Zilani who had wanted humanity destroyed. Most of the major galactic species had supported the plan, either actively or by choosing to look the other way. "That was a mistake," Veltrix said desperately. "We can make amends. We can establish trade agreements, technology sharing, mutual defense pacts." Morrison studied the alien's frightened face. 2 years ago, he might have been interested in such offers. Now they meant nothing to him. "You misunderstand the situation, Veltrix. We are not negotiating. We are not seeking your approval or friendship. We are showing the galaxy what happens to species that try to hunt humanity." The connection ended, and Morrison turned back to the tactical display. The Zilani homeworld was dying, but that was only part of the plan. The real message was being sent to every species in the galaxy. Dr. Kim had perfected her biological weapons during the campaign. Each major alien species now faced the possibility of a pathogen designed specifically for their biology. The Kethver, who had helped attack human colonies, were already experiencing the effects of a virus that attacked their nervous systems. "Sir, reports from the Kethver front," said Lieutenant Torres. "Their empire is collapsing." "Admiral Chin reports that Kethver worlds are surrendering without fighting," Morrison nodded. The Kethver had been brutal enemies, but they learned quickly when faced with extinction. Their warriors were tough and aggressive, but when they realized that humans had developed weapons that could kill only them while leaving other species unharmed, their will to fight collapsed. "What about the other species?" "The Therians have withdrawn all their forces to their home system. The Vec are requesting asylum on neutral worlds. The Oltarans are offering to become human vassals. The transformation of galactic politics was happening faster than anyone had expected. Species that had dominated the galaxy for centuries were now begging for mercy from the humans they had tried to destroy. "Admiral, we have a problem," said Captain Kim. "Some of our own people are questioning the campaign. They say we have gone too far." Morrison was not surprised. Even among humans, there were those who thought the response had been too extreme. They argued that humanity was becoming as bad as their enemies, that mercy and forgiveness were better than revenge. "What do you think, Captain?" Sarah Kim was quiet for a moment. "I think about my sister's report, sir. About the human genetic material she found in Zilani technology. About the medical missions that were really intelligence gathering. About the plan to erase us completely. And I think they chose to make this a war of extinction. We are just better at it than they expected." That was the core of the matter. The aliens had planned genocide, but they had expected to be the only ones capable of carrying it out. They had not anticipated that humans could develop the technology and the will to turn their own tactics against them. The Zilani homeworld took 3 days to die completely. By the end, the crystal cities that had stood for thousands of years were reduced to piles of minerals. The beings who had absorbed the knowledge and genetics of 12 extinct species were gone forever, but Morrison was not finished. The death of the Zilani homeworld was being broadcast across the galaxy on every communication channel. Every alien species could see exactly what had happened and understand what it meant. "Begin the next phase," he ordered. Human fleets began moving toward the home systems of every species that had supported the plan to destroy humanity. They carried weapons specifically designed for each target species, and they carried a message that was being broadcast ahead of them. The message was simple and terrifying. "You plan to erase humanity from existence. Now you will understand what extinction really means. Any species that submits completely will be allowed to survive as our subjects. Any species that resists will join the Zilani in oblivion." The response was immediate. Across the galaxy, alien governments began surrendering without fighting. The species that had once considered humans to be primitive and weak now feared them more than anything else in the universe. "Sir, the Galactic Council is requesting an emergency meeting," reported Captain Kim. "They want to discuss terms of surrender." Morrison looked at the tactical display showing human fleets advancing on dozens of worlds. In 2 years, humanity had gone from near extinction to becoming the most feared force in the galaxy. "Tell them we will accept their surrender when every species responsible for planning our destruction has been dealt with. Until then, there are no negotiations." The war was almost over, but Morrison knew that the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had learned what they were capable of when pushed to the edge of extinction, and they would never forget that lesson. Neither would anyone else. Admiral Morrison stood in the ruins of what had once been the Galactic Council chambers on Centrus Prime. The massive building that had housed representatives from hundreds of species for over 1,000 years was now mostly empty. Only 12 species remained in the galaxy with enough population and technology to still call themselves civilizations. The war had ended 6 months ago when the last Kethver stronghold surrendered. But the peace that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever known. It was not the peace of cooperation and friendship that had existed before. It was the peace that came when everyone understood exactly who was in charge. "Admiral, The final population reports are ready, said Captain Sarah Kim. She looked older now, marked by 3 years of total war. They all looked older, Morrison took the datapad and read through the numbers. The Zilani were completely extinct. The Kethfer had lost 90% of their population and existed only as scattered refugees. The Thurians, Vec, and Ulterans had survived by surrendering early, but their military forces had been completely dismantled. How many human colonies are requesting expansion permits? He asked. 412 new settlements planned. For the next year, most of them in former Zilani space. Morrison nodded. Human population was growing rapidly, both from new births and from the return of humans, who had been absorbed into the Zilani collective. Dr. Kim's research had found ways to extract and restore human consciousness from the crystal matrices. Though the process left people changed by their experiences, he walked to the large window that looked out over the capital city of Centris Prime. Human administrators and engineers were everywhere, rebuilding the infrastructure to serve human needs. The few remaining aliens moved carefully through the streets, wearing identification tags that marked them as subjects of the human hegemony. "Sir, Dr. Kim is here to see you," announced Lieutenant Torres from the doorway. Dr. Sarah Kim entered the room carrying a sealed container. She had become the most important scientist in human space, and her research had shaped the new galactic order more than any military victory. "Admiral, I have completed the biological survey of the remaining alien species," she said, setting the container on his desk. "Every species now has a documented vulnerability that we can exploit if necessary." Morrison looked at the container, knowing it contained samples of biological agents that could eliminate any alien species within days. How many species still pose a potential threat? None militarily. But I am concerned about long-term political stability. Some species are adapting too well to human rule. They are learning to think like us, to anticipate our needs and desires. Is that a problem? Dr. Kim was quiet for a moment. It could be. If they become too good at predicting human behavior, they might find ways to manipulate us. Just like the Zilani did before the war, Morrison considered this. The Zilani had been experts at telling humans what they wanted to hear, at appearing to be perfect allies while secretly planning their destruction. He would not allow that mistake to be repeated. What do you recommend? Genetic modifications to ensure loyalty. Simple alterations that would make it impossible for any alien species to plan long-term deception or rebellion against human authority. The suggestion was logical but disturbing. Before the war, humans had believed in the rights of all intelligent species to remain unchanged. Now they were discussing genetic modifications to ensure alien compliance. "Do it," Morrison said finally. "Let's start with voluntary programs. Let them choose between modification and relocation to reservation worlds." Dr. Kim nodded and left with her samples. Morrison knew that most aliens would choose modification. The reservation worlds were isolated and primitive with limited technology, and no contact with galactic civilization. For species that had once traveled between stars, it would be a kind of living death. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. The holographic image that appeared showed Elena Vasquez, looking exactly as she had 3 years ago when she sent her warning from the Meridian, but this was not a recording. This was Elena herself, restored from the Zilani collective with her memories and personality intact. She now served as head of the Human Hegemony's Department of Alien Affairs. "Admiral, the Ultron delegation is here for the final surrender ceremony," she said. "They are requesting permission to speak." "Granted." "Put them through." 3 Ultron representatives appeared on screen, their tall, thin forms showing the characteristic color changes that indicated extreme stress. Morrison recognized the central figure as Veltrix, the former council chairman who had tried to negotiate during the attack on the Zilani homeworld. "Admiral Morrison," Veltrix said, his voice carefully controlled. "We come to formally surrender the sovereignty of the Alteron Republic to the human hegemony. We accept all terms and conditions of subject status." Morrison studied the alien's four eyes, looking for any sign of deception or hidden agenda. Do you understand what subject status means, Veltrix? Yes, Admiral. Our species will exist at the pleasure of humanity. Our worlds, our resources, our very lives belong to the hegemony. We will never again be permitted to make decisions that affect galactic politics or human interests. And do you accept this willingly? Veltrix's skin showed colors that Morrison had learned indicated resignation and defeat. We accept it as the consequence of our actions. We help plan the extinction of humanity. We deserve whatever fate you choose for us. Morrison nodded. Your honesty is noted. The Alteron species will be permitted to continue existing, but under strict supervision. Any violation of hegemony law will result in immediate biological punishment. After the connection ended, Morrison turned back to the window. The view showed a galaxy that had been completely transformed. Human ships patrolled every trade route. Human colonies were being established on the best worlds. Human technology was advancing at a rate that amazed even the people developing it. Elena Vasquez entered the office, carrying a datapad with the day's reports. The memorial service for the Meridian crew is tomorrow, she said. Will you be attending? Of course. Elena sat down across from his desk. Jake, do you ever think about what we have become? Morrison looked at his old friend. Elena had been dead for 3 years, her consciousness trapped in an alien collective, but she had been restored with all her memories intact. She remembered the woman she had been before the war, and sometimes she seemed troubled by what humanity had become. What do you mean? 3 years ago, we were explorers and diplomats. We believed in cooperation and peaceful coexistence. Now we rule the galaxy through fear and biological weapons. We have become exactly what we once fought against. Morrison considered her words. Elena, they tried to erase us from existence. Every human who ever lived, every piece of human art or music or literature, every memory of our species. They wanted to make it as if we had never existed at all. I know, and maybe what we did was necessary, but I worry about what comes next. What happens to a species that has learned to rule through fear? It was a question that Morrison had been avoiding. Humanity had survived and conquered, but they had changed in the process. The peaceful explorers of the past were gone, replaced by something harder and more dangerous. We make sure it never happens again, he said finally. We make sure that no species ever again has the power to threaten human survival. Elena nodded, but Morrison could see she was not entirely satisfied with that answer. None of them were. The victory had been total and necessary, but the cost had been their innocence. A year later, Morrison stood in another place that held deep meaning for humanity. The memorial where the Meridian had been destroyed now showed a simple inscription carved into black stone. They underestimated our capacity for friendship. They learned too late about our capacity for vengeance. Around the memorial, crystalline formations caught and reflected the light of the local sun. They were all that remained of the Zelani cities that had once covered this region of space. Beautiful to look at, but lifeless and empty. Morrison's daughter stood beside him, reading the inscription. She was 15 years old and had grown up in a galaxy where humanity ruled absolutely. To her, human supremacy was natural and obvious. She could not imagine a time when humans had been weak or afraid. Father, did the aliens really try to destroy all humans? She asked. Yes, they did. Why? Morrison looked at the crystalline formations sparkling in the sunlight. Because they were afraid of what we might become. His daughter was quiet for a moment. Were they right to be afraid? Morrison thought about the question. In the end, the aliens had been afraid that humanity would become a threat to galactic stability. They had tried to prevent that by destroying humanity completely. Instead, they had created exactly what they feared most. Yes, he said finally, they were right to be afraid. They just chose the wrong solution. The galaxy was at peace now. It was the peace of absolute human dominance enforced by weapons. That could eliminate any species that threatened human interests. The peace of a galaxy where everyone understood exactly what happened to those who tried to hunt humanity. It was not the peace that humans had once dreamed of, but it was the peace they had earned with their blood and determination. And it would last as long as the galaxy remembered what happened when you underestimated human beings.